We are live.
Okay, great. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Design Advisory Panel meeting for October 27th. And so I'll call the meeting to order. Are there any late items to add to our agenda? Anybody have anything late? No? Okay. And I'd like to introduce, first of all, can I have a motion to adopt the agenda as presented? Kate, seconder Tony, all in favor? Great, okay. And we had one set of minutes to look at, minutes from Thursday, it was September 22nd, this meeting. And is there any issues or concerns about those minutes? Everybody got them? Kevin, you didn't get the minutes? Yes, okay. If there's, and can I have a motion to accept the minutes as presented? Kevin presents, Tony seconds, all in favor? Great. Jason, I'm assuming, is that a hand up too?
I was not in attendance at that meeting, Madam Chair.
Very good. Okay, fair enough. All right. And so tonight we've got two presentations, the first of which is a property on Browns Lane, and City Planner Christine Mays will introduce that project to us. Go ahead, Christine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All right, so development permit application DP 1283 is for a three-story ground-oriented multifamily residential, three-story ground-oriented multifamily residential buildings comprised of a total of 21 three-bedroom townhouse units. A lot of threes in there, sorry guys. The subject property is zoned residential corridor, so that's Core 1, and is designated neighborhood in the city plan. The property is located on the northeast corner of Browns Lane, so that's pretty close to Bay Event Park. So the subject property also falls within Development Permit Area 8, so that is form and character, and therefore the general development permit area design guidelines will be applying to this development. There are two proposed variances. One is to reduce the front yard setback from 3.5 meters to 3.46 meters, as well as to reduce the rear yard setback, and that's from 7.5 meters to 5.31 meters. And thank you, Madam Chair. If you have any questions, or the panel has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Great, thanks, Christine. The applicant then is that Alan Lowe. You're going to be presenting today?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Alan Lowe, and I'm here with Dawood from my office as well. We have our landscape architect, Brad Forth, that has just joined, as well as our civil consultant, Braden from Newcastle, and our client, Angus Sutherland, is also on the call. I am going to share a screen, and I'm going to allow Dawood from my office to make the presentation for you. I will, let's see here. Okay, can you see that? Can you see that? Hello?
Nope, not getting anything there.
Not getting anything?
Nope.
That's not good. Okay, let me try it again.
Alan, at the bottom of your screen, it should say share screen.
Yes.
And then you should be able to pick one of your monitors. There it is.
Is that it?
You're good.
Oh, wow. Okay, thank you. Just wait. I'm just gonna go back to, there you go. Okay, Dawood from my office is going to be making the presentation.
Okay, hello everyone. So we start off with some existing pictures of the site. Let's see if this is moving. Okay. So this is a site on the right-hand side, which is east. We've got the gravel walkway connecting the south and north of the site. This is a picture from the other side. On the right-hand side here, we've got the site. The site is surrounded with single-family dwellings, townhouses. This is one of them to the south of the site, and our site is right here in the left side. Basically some other buildings. This is the lane, the gravel walkway. That's the side. It's pretty sloped from north to south, and we've got this row of townhouses towards west. That's the Browns Lane. So the site is located between the Labio Road on the north and the Brackenwood Park to south. To east, we have got this gravel walkway, and to left, we have got single-family dwellings. There's a row of townhouses to the east as well. So the front yard is basically facing the Labia Road. It's in Core 1 zone, and we are proposing 3 buildings of 3-story. It's within the allowed FAR, and it's less than the permitted site coverage. We are asking for 2 variances. One, a variance of 0.04 meters for the front yard setback, which has this kind of irregular shape, and a variance of 2.19 meter for the rear yard setback. The reason for that is we had to break apart the buildings so we can create these connections, and also in order to have enough basically landscaping and to stay within the front yard setback, and also to have the this common amenity space to south. We kind of, needed this variance. And also, we needed to space the buildings to basically meet the limiting distances to meet the code requirements. This is a typical floor plan. We are going with 2-car garages for each unit. And the second floor are the living spaces, kitchen and dining. And the third floor, each unit has its own 3 bedrooms with bay windows and balconies. It's a slope roof with gables, and looking at the west elevation, that's how the buildings are located. We're going with pitch roof, as mentioned, with those dormers with its own kind of detailing, and it creates this kind of vertical element for each unit. And this is the east elevation facing the lane, and we have got a combination of traditional and contemporary sort of design with we've got hardy shake siding, and also hardy board and batten, and obviously our ashful roof shingles and balconies with glass railing, opaque glass. And the 2 ends of this site have this sort of that's the north of the site, which is the main entrance. We can articulate this more to make it more prominent. The other one I wanted to mention is, in terms of the color palette, we avoided too many color variations because we wanted the development to look more sort of homogeneous, and at the same time, those dormers, give character to each unit. In terms of materiality, as mentioned, it's basically hardy shakes, hardy board and batten, and we have got those sort of detailing at the bay windows and the dormers with these sort of planter boxes on the 3rd floor. This is an aerial view how the buildings are located, with this entrance to the site. We'll work out this side of the building to make it more prominent, but that's how it sits within the site. The back of the site facing the lane, we've got chain link fencing facing the gravel walkway to create this kind of connection between the backyard and the lane, and also to provide, you know, more security and more lights to the lane. And this is another view coming from the Lavia Road into the site. And that's how it sits there. Again, this is the other view with this, you know, connections between the buildings. And in terms of landscaping, if you have any questions, the landscape architect can cover more. But if I go quickly through it, you know, we've got this deciduous trees along the west side of the property with comfort trees between the drive aisle and along the east side. We've got a series of, you know, rain gardens here and, you know, to the north side along the west side of the property. And with two common amenity spaces, one to the south and, you know, a seating area towards the center of the site. We could make this bigger, you know, because, you know, we have more parking than needed to make this seating area bigger. We have got some, you know, permeable paving in the center of and the end of the site. And, you know, we've got these connections between the buildings. So it creates this kind of connection. And at the same time, you know, these between the buildings, there is no landscaping because, you know, they wouldn't get, you know, much sunlight anyways. And yeah, this is the civil drawing just to show, you know, how the sidewalk is connected, you know, to the gravel walkway, you know, and it's, you know, aligned with the building. And that's it. If you have any questions, we'll be glad to answer. Thank you.
So I don't know if you have any questions for the landscape architect or if you want them to make a presentation as well, because we could actually leave the landscape plan up. And Brad, if you wanted to say anything.
Sure. Davoud did a great job explaining it, but I'll just highlight a couple of the key points. One is the row of large deciduous trees along the top of your sheet there. I wanted something of some significant stature there, and we would incorporate those with rain gardens along the edge for stormwater control. We broke up the roadway with 3 bands of considerable piece of permeable paving. And then at the entrances, one of the things in the renderings it doesn't show are the small trees that are in front of the buildings on the roadway side. And there's at the entrances, there's grade changes. So there's retaining walls and then the little planter. But in between those, you can see we've inserted small trees. Obviously, we're going to have to use some soil cells or whatever underneath the driveways to make those happen. But I thought it would be nice to green the frontage of the little project here. But this one's nice in terms of the fact that there are walkways between these townhouse blocks, and I think that's a really nice feature that lets people come from the roadway through with their gated access to Browns Lane. And along the back, we've incorporated a row of smaller trees that kind of are in keeping with the idea that these backyards are intended to actually look out and have surveillance over Browns Lane, and that leads to the choice of the fencing type for along the lane. What I chose is a black vinyl coated chain link fence with wooden posts. So you get that warm feeling of a wooden fence, but you also get the permeability, the visual permeability to look out at the lane. And it's just a nice extension to the backyard spaces. And the backyards of these townhouses have their own patio with a screen in between, but they also have kind of common access to a long lawn that goes along serpentine along the back of the property, so that they can come out and walk along if they wanted to between neighbors. But it's really intended to have the sense that your backyard is much bigger than it is. And then I think that's The little amenity area is very small, only for passive seating, not really intended to be any big thing, just a small paved area with a little walkway and some special rain garden plantings and a few benches. And then there was the sitting area. The one that's probably more prominent is a waiting area in the front by the big section of permeable paving. It's meant to feel like a courtyard in the center where people could kind of gather and then sit on and visit your neighbors at those benches. And that's it.
Thanks, Brad.
Okay, is that it for your presentation, Alan?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Good. Maybe you can stop sharing your screen then, and we'll turn to the panel here. Does anybody have any questions? Any panel members have questions for staff at this point? Kevin, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Christine, thanks for your introduction. And I just have a question regarding the future access that's noted on the site plan to the property that I guess joins on the western side of the property. Can you explain what's happening with that and if it's a requirement by the city?
It is indeed. So this was a requirement of the rezoning of this property. So that future access is secured. If you're looking at the neighboring site, the road access from Browns Lane is a lot more difficult. So this is to reduce access from Browns Lane. It would be through the site instead. And so
will
it was
it
secured
be
through
a
rezoning.
primary access to the site or will it be a secondary access?
Likely primary, but I can take a look and
Okay.
get back to you on that question.
Yeah, because there would have to be some sort of access agreement with this between the two properties, correct?
Yes, and so that would have again been secured through rezoning, so likely through the covenant.
Okay.
But I'll give that a double check and
Okay.
let the chair know.
Okay, thanks, Christine.
Okay, anybody else questions? I have one, Christine. I'm just wondering if you could clarify Browns Lane. I went over and had a look at that. It was hard to tell. Is it a walking path, a vehicle path lane? Is it going to be used for anything other than a walking path?
Just a walking path. So it is an active transportation route, so pedestrians and cyclists.
Right. Okay. So there, yeah, it was unclear whether there was a block. I realized cars couldn't go all the way down, but it wasn't too sure.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Okay. And let's see. Maybe we can get a start here. Tony, would you like to? Oh, sorry, Angela. I didn't see you there. Okay. Angela has a comment or a question for staff.
Just a question for staff. In terms of the addressing, because I also did take a drive down there and I noticed that the other multifamily development adjacent to it is also Browns Lane. Is that correct?
It is, yes. So it is effectively at the corner of Browns Lane and Browns Lane, but part of Browns Lane is the pedestrian access path. And that's why you'll see on that site plan that Alan showed, it goes sort of around and curves around the property. And so there is still access off of Browns Lane, but as soon as it turns in between those two developments, it reduces itself to that pedestrian access.
Okay, so it'll continue to be Browns Lane.
That's right, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Angela. Tony, would you like to get started on this one?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you to the applicant for your presentation. Excellent project, a good example of another thoughtful infill here with family-oriented housing. The 3-bedroom units are obviously excellent market necessity here and everywhere, it seems, just at this point. Just to get the variances out of the way, they seemed fairly minor to me and not that consequential, so I personally wouldn't have a problem with supporting the variances as requested. The only comment I had, and it's really a function of the screen and the drawings and everything, but it was to do with the color scheme, which I think is great. But depending on which drawing you look at, it looks very different. So on the first set of elevations, it looked quite dark and monolithic. And then I saw some of the 3Ds and it looked a lot lighter and more cheerful. So I guess if I don't know how to really address it, but I definitely have preference toward the lighter, cheerful option. Otherwise, I think it was good. Yeah, here and in the other one that had your material board on it. These came across to me as a lot more friendlier than the first set of straight on streetscape elevations. So I think if this is the kind of color scheme that you're looking at, I think you did a really nice job here. That really was my only comment, except I'm not sure I clearly read the staff comment where I thought it was suggesting to eliminate the surplus parking stalls on the site in favor of presumably more landscaping. I think we all like more landscaping, but in this case, I just wonder whether it isn't prudent to have some visitor parking, because I don't know what's available in that particular neck of the woods for visitor parking. So I would hesitate to eliminate that. Otherwise, I don't have any comments. I think it's a great project, and I think that's all that I have to say at the moment. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Tony. Kevin, you want to give it a go?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Alan and your team for the presentation. I'll just jump into the variances. I fully support the variances. I have no issues with those. I like this project. The need for larger developments around this area, 3-bedroom units are becoming more important. So I really appreciate that, and I really appreciate how you dealt with the floor area ratio and the lot coverage as well on this project. As for, I'll just jump on what Tony mentioned regarding the parking. That was one of my comments too. I totally agree. Normally I would be wanting you to reduce parking, but in these types of units where they're all 3-bedroom units, the need for parking, especially visitor parking, especially being that there's really no street parking whatsoever around this neighborhood. I think keeping the excess parking is important for this project. As for other citing things, I would say that possibly built in building 1, there was a comment in city's staff comments about looking at ways to enhance the north elevation of building 1 and how it relates to I guess Labio Road and Browns Road. So whether you might need to consider reducing building 1 to 5 units or increasing it to 7 units so you can get the entryway on the furthest north elevation. I'm not sure if you thought about that, Alan, and given any thought to ways to enhance that elevation. If you want to comment on that.
I think that we can actually use the same form, but enhance that portion of the elevation to make it work better so that it fronts Browns Lane a bit better.
So you wouldn't want to consider adding an entry there?
We for the floor plan, it doesn't really work, but we could put an element on the north side there so that it looks like it's fronting Browns Lane as opposed to being a side.
Yeah, I was just saying that if you did change it to an odd number so that the entry would be on the north side, so you can move the entry around to the face the north, that might be a way to make it not just a decoration, let's say, but because you're gonna have a door coming into your garage, right? If you leave it the way it is. So that's my only comment with that. I won't put it in as a recommendation unless somebody jumps in on that as well. I think staff also commented on looking at individualizing the units, personalizing them, whether it's possibly through door color or some ways to make them a little bit more personalized. We've been requesting that quite often on the projects that are coming in, so you might want to consider that. And I'm not sure if you've given any thought to that as well. The units are nicely designed. I like the use of materials and the color scheme that you have. But there might be ways just to highlight the entries for these or to personalize them to make them a little bit more individualized. I've dealt with a north elevation, so looking at ways at that. I'm assuming that all these units pretty much are going to have to be terraced, both in the drive aisle and also Browns Road. So how you deal with that, obviously on the front, or I guess the drive aisle, it appears, I don't have the exact numbers, but it appears that the drop in elevation down from driveways, the retaining walls you're going to have are going to exceed 2 feet and will require guardrails. And if you are putting in guardrails along those driveways, do you have any details that you're going to put in with those?
We don't at this point. We're hoping that we could grade this so that we won't need the guardrails, but we'll have to take a look at it in more detail.
Yeah, I could see that along Browns Road, but on the front where you have the sidewalk and the driveways going up into the garage, if they do exceed 2 feet, you do have to put some sort of guard there or a buffer along there to create that or to deal with that drop in elevation. So hopefully you're going to be using guard details along there, along the driveway and the entranceway. There aren't just going to be an inexpensive detail there. That hopefully it'll be something that is going to complement the building and not just be an inexpensive aluminum guardrail. The design of the units, again, relating to form and character, those rear yard, I guess I call them the rear yard areas, they really don't have any sort of functional purpose as how they relate to the building themselves. You're basically exiting up through the back of your garage. And I'm not sure how you need to deal with that, but you're going to have patios out there, but are you really going to use those patios? Obviously you can't put stairs down from the deck or the balcony up above, but did you look at any other options of how to deal with those areas, whether or not they're really practical to have as yard areas?
Essentially, most of the people will be using the decks that they have at the back there. The back area where there is the yard, if there are kids, the parents would love to throw them outside and have a secured area that they could run around. So, I think that if there are families coming in here, those lower areas will be used quite a lot.
Yeah, but I believe Brad mentioned that it's not going to be necessarily individualized areas. Is that correct?
That's right. There's like a serpentine type of a grass lawn area that is essentially shared.
Okay, so it's going to be shared area, but where those landscaped areas on each side, on each end of them, it doesn't appear there's going to be gates on the end when they come into those the common walkways that comes through the buildings. Is that correct, Brad?
Right now, I don't think we're showing fence returns to the building, but but I think you're quite right. If you want to secure them, maybe each of the 3 zones would be secured. So either that, or we need to put a gate, move the gate from the lane inbound, and have a return and then a gate at the building, closer to the building. So I'm not sure yet, but you raise a good point there.
Yeah, it's just a matter whether or not it's necessary to have it as a secure area. Obviously, it's going to be difficult for the parents living in these units to oversee them. I guess you can be up on the balcony looking down, but I guess you wouldn't really want small children out there, and whether or not it's more appropriate to look at options like what city staff mentioned, to try to make it less of a chain link fence and looking at ways to maybe make it just a nicer landscaped area, maybe not looking at them necessarily as yards. I'm not sure what the solution is, but it just seems like there's a dilemma happening between the form and character and also the landscaped areas.
Well, I think the other thing is that I suppose it's possible to demise each of these with a small chain link fence connector. So I don't know that right now, I don't know that the client is thought about that, but I thought it may be nice to just let them all just leave it continuous, but and then control it at the ends. So maybe we'll give a little bit more thought to that. But I think that
Yeah,
the idea of the chain link fence with the wooden posts, so I've done it before on other projects and it's actually quite handsome. If people think, oh, chain link fence, that's no good, it's going to look bad, but a black vinyl chain link fence with wood posts actually looks very contemporary and also quite warm and pleasant. So
yeah, I don't mind it actually. I guess we didn't see that detail in our package. At least I didn't see it. But from what I saw, I like the detail. I just think the programming of that area and also how it's going to terrace down either through sloped lawn or retaining walls. There needs to be some sort of decisions made in that area. That's really all I'm really trying to point out with that. Brad, I think most of the rest of my questions are for you, Brad. On your landscape concept, you showed the permeable pavings, and then I'm assuming asphalt areas on the main drive aisle.
Yeah.
And some of those transitions, I think 2 of them happen right in the middle of a driveway. And you might just want to look at that. I think you probably want it to be on either one side or the other.
yeah, I was lining it up with the parking bays, but yeah, maybe
I think a couple of them run right in the middle of that.
nice.
And I'm just, it's not a recommendation. I think it's probably just an oversight
yeah,
that you probably wouldn't do that.
yeah. I think you're right. I think you could easily extend the one on the end to where it joins with the end of the stall, so that it has a better transition. Yeah, I mean, I think those are good thoughts for sure.
Okay, and there's an existing significant tree on the tree report. I'm assuming that's coming out. I don't see it on your concept.
It is, yeah, that's the plan, that it's being removed, I believe.
Okay, and let's see here. My last thing is what's the distance on those walkways that come between the buildings? What's the width of that corridor? Those corridors, about 8 feet or 10 feet or 8 feet?
I believe the walkway is 6 feet across.
And that's plus the stream zone or river rock areas.
The surface is 6 feet, and then the remainder to the buildings is river rock. It's sort of shady in those areas, and I thought river rock would be a nice kind of way to keep it kind of easy maintenance for.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
the sidewalk is 6 feet, and then the river rock is in addition to that.
Yeah.
Okay. So did you consider, like, I like your serpentine profile that you're using along Browns Lane. Did you consider using more of a serpentine sidewalk where you might be able to create some landscape pockets, like even drought resistant planting, things that might not require, or even things that might not require too much sunlight in those areas?
Yeah, we did. I didn't. I actually kept it really simple because I thought, that I was actually quite happy that we were able to get connectors through, where we actually have some connectivity. So maybe I was just pretty excited about just connecting. But I'd like to keep away from the building walls a little bit because there could be some side windows and such up. I'm not sure. I didn't. I thought I'd just keep it in the middle, but I could look at
the sidewalk doesn't need to be 6 feet wide. It could be less than that. It's strictly pedestrian. It's not going to be a major thoroughfare for pedestrian traffic, really. So if you narrowed it and looked at something, I'll leave it to Kate to see how she feels regarding that. But aside from that, I think you have a really nice project. There are some things regarding the terracing. I think you're going to have some things that you have to address as the project proceeds. But all in all, I think you have a very nice project here, Alan, and thank you for the presentation.
Thanks.
Thanks, Kevin. Christine, maybe you want to speak to just clarifying that the condition of the rezoning.
Perfect. Yeah. So further to Kevin's questions, panel member Kevin, So condition of the rezoning was a reciprocal access agreement, and that was to be secured on the subject property to provide future access to 2333 and 2343 Labia Road to the west. So it's the neighboring property and the property next door to it. There is currently a letdown on the property that's closest to it, and that's just for a single family dwelling. So those accesses would be considered should a future rezoning application be received by the city.
Okay, thanks, Christine, for clarifying that. Yeah. Jason, would you like to give your comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation from the applicant. Many of my comments have already been said, and I don't need to labor them. But one of the things that I did notice that I thought was particularly nice about the project is the way that you were able to take advantage of the topography in the site and how each entry has its own level, essentially, to help create more individuality of each of the units and the entry experiences. So I did appreciate that kind of subtle detail. I agree that, you know, I could see the comment from the staff around maybe potential color or differentiation, particularly on the end, as it was discussed. I can appreciate the difficulty of going to an odd number of units, given the way that the units overlap and interlock with one another. But just some further articulation along that front edge, or potentially the introduction of another material, whether it's maybe a nice clean brick to complement the modern aesthetic, which could also be continued through maybe some of the other buildings, again, to reinforce the entry experience, is something I could see as a nice way to help provide entry to the site as well as the individual units. Otherwise, like I said, most of my other comments had already been spoken for, and I also support the variances. So that's all for me. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great, thanks, Jason. Kate.
Great. Thank you, all of the team, for your presentation. And I agree with most of what has been said. I think I would just emphasize what Jason said again about, and what the staff comments regarding the, I'm going to do front of the building, that I do think that's the weakest part of your project. I do think you've done a great job, you know, fitting in a number of units that are large enough to suit families on a small site. But I do find the entry the weakest part, and I'm hoping with whatever you do to the facade will help improve that. And also, I'm assuming that the roadworks have not completely been defined for that. It's now going to be called Browns Road, right? Not Browns Lane. And that if there is opportunity, Brad, with permission from the city, of course, to co-opt some more space on the city's boulevard, I think that would greatly benefit the front entry of your project. But I realize that probably hasn't been quite defined where those lines are. But I do find that the weakest part of this whole project is its relationship to the road and what its street address will be. And so any ways to improve that would be great. And it could be, there was a note from staff about relocating the bikes, and I could see potential for that, the bikes being moved to the middle of the site. That might actually be a good safety move as well. You know, bike theft, like near your seating area. And also, I agree that having extra parking is good for these kind of projects, but maybe losing one parking space to help either improve that central seating area, or putting the bikes there and then allowing you to have more space to do something at the entry would improve the overall project. And I do agree that I think the topography does help differentiate the different units. So that's working in your favor, as Jason had mentioned. And then lastly, my only thought was, Brad, I don't think it's necessary, but I think I know you've done in other projects, had our entry, like to the two entry gates off of Browns Lane, maybe making them stand out a little bit more might also add a little extra something to your project.
I think that's a good idea. I'll look at that, and maybe you're right. If we move the bike rack, we could put like an entry signage element and try and create a little bit more pizzazz at that front.
Yeah.
I'll definitely look at that. I'm making some notes.
Okay, and that's my only main concern is really just making that front entry feel more like a front instead of a side as it feels currently.
Okay.
And that's all I have to say. Actually, Kevin, you were asking me about, I can't decide about the fencing on the back, and I think it will have to be up to Brad and the owner about how they want to separate. I think there is some, having less fencing and gates makes it definitely easier for maintenance, and I'm going to assume that this is probably going to be they're going to have one person coming in and maintaining this, so there is that to be considered too. Yeah. And I guess, sorry, I'm just triggering. I'm looking at Kevin and I'm remembering one more thing. I also appreciate that between the buildings, yes, there is not very much light and not much room for growing. But that said, you know, the plantings could creep in from the edges, and we certainly have a lot of ferns that can tolerate very droughty and harsh conditions. And it might be that the planting kind of creeps into those corridors from the edges and then kind of diminishes to the rock, if that's what you see fit, Brad. Okay, now I'm done. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you again for your presentation.
So could I say that I could show a row of planting along the outside of the fence line on the lane side?
Oh no, I was thinking the walkways between the buildings.
Oh, okay.
Like if the planting creeped in a bit.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, that just something to, I'm not going to make that as a recommendation. I'm just saying it.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that you didn't mean you were hoping to see a line of plants outside the fence line.
No, I think that you'll just encounter trouble with our maintenance and vandalism, etc.
Okay,
yeah.
Thanks.
Okay.
Great, and Angela.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the applicant's presentation. I definitely agree with everybody's comments so far. A lot of the ones I was going to mention, definitely the north elevation. I think Jason had some great points, and Kate as well. So I think that's definitely something that needs to be sort of looked at as a project. And then again, the fence alleyway, I know before we've talked that lighting might not be part of the DAP conversation, but we have talked about lighting in the past. I'm not quite sure where we stand on that, but just as a point, I feel like that alleyway would do well to have a nice low-level lighting plan that doesn't affect the neighbors, but would create a safer experience for the people that live there or whoever's using that laneway to feel safe walking down that laneway in the evenings. So I think that's something to consider. And then also too, I was feeling like it would be very nice to have a connection to be able to access into your unit from the laneway individually, possibly, but I didn't realize that this is a common landscape area along the edge. But I guess I'm not sure, is the individual postage stamp yards owned by the unit? And then it's just a common landscape area along the edge?
Yeah, what I'm showing is that you would basically occupy your patio, and then you could walk out onto the lawn, which is connected to your neighbor's lawn, which is connected to their neighbor's lawn. So at this point in time, we're not showing them individually demised into little lots. And that I think but we do have exit gates out onto Browns Lane in 2 locations where we have those mid-building walkways.
Yeah.
And then the one walkway lines up with the future access point, and the other one kind of lines up with the sitting area, and that's kind of where we thought we would control those to a couple of points from Browns Lane. But I mean, I suppose it's possible to put more gates in, and I just have to speak with the client and see if they want to demise them. Because when you demise those into smaller gardens, it's great for the individual owner, but then unfortunately, how do you maintain it? You have to put gates between every, how do you maintain it? You go into everybody's gate basically to mow the grass. It's just very challenging.
Right. Because I was thinking maybe we could pull the gate right back to the grassy area, and then all of that landscaping is connected to the laneway, rather than blocking it off. And maybe that's maintaining that landscaping along that laneway could be easily accessed even further that way, with the fencing being just pulled back to where the grass starts.
It's an interesting thought. When pulling the fence back would mean that we have planting on the outside of it. I guess that's possible, but we typically like to put a fence on the property line, because if you leave a fence off property line, like inbound for a long period of time without a right-of-way agreement or something, then it could be claimed later that was part of the city land. So typically don't do that for legal reasons, but that's why I was asking if you were looking for a line of planting outside the fence line on a city property. That's a different matter than it like.
Yeah, I wasn't suggesting on the city's property, but
I think in this case, the only decision to be made would be whether to demise each of the little gardens into separate pieces. And right now we're showing it not demised, but I suppose it's possible that the client may at some point think about that. I'm not sure.
And we also wouldn't want to move the fence in, because then all of that landscaping will feel like it's part of the public access, and it would just cause nothing but problems for the Strata Council. And by moving the fence in as well, it just makes the exterior patio area for all the units that much smaller and more contained. So I think that what we have actually works better, and it could become more of a community space for each of the units, so that the 6 units and the 7 units could share a larger green area, but also have their own individual patios.
The other thing I wanted to mention to you is like the chain link fence. I have a different choice. I could put a solid fence along Browns Lane, a more solid privacy fence, which would be, I think, I made a choice in this instance to use a more open kind of fence where you can see through and then have better surveillance over Browns Lane so the individual homeowners in there would be looking out, and they'd see through their, over their little plantings, and they could see people coming and going down Browns Lane. And they're quite set back, so I think it won't feel threatening in any way. It'll actually just put a lot of eyes on that lane for SEPTED reasons. I think that would be a big advantage here.
Mm-hmm. Allows more light in as well for the landscaping.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, just thought I'd discuss that part. One sort of suggestion, I was thinking that community garden area that's at the south end of the property, it's sort of, everybody has their own individual sort of space, and there's that other community space off the driveway area. So I just had a thought that maybe that's something that could be sort of thought of or set up as a community garden area rather than another seating area that might not get used very often. So that's just a thought that.
It's right next to the park space, which is one thing to consider. It's pretty tiny, so I'm not sure it's get a lot of sun in there, but I could certainly, if that's something that the design panel would like to see instead of this. It was just a space that we had allocated for common amenity. So I thought, really, let's keep it very low key, put a more solid screen between it and the end unit, and then have like a little refuge spot there which could feel like it has some openness to the park, like you could sit there and look into the park. But I mean, I'm open to some thoughts if you have different thoughts about it.
Yeah, and it's totally just an idea to consider. Just thought maybe it might be a better use of a space that the whole building could use, and sort of a gathering space as a purpose, and of course green sort of idea, food production. What else did I have here? I just had a note that the Core 1 zoning did permit live work units. And, when I was driving around, I was driving around at night, and a lot of these sort of townhomes in the area, there was a few people doing work in their garages, woodworking and different things, mechanics. So I was just wondering, I know that, I'm not trying to suggest changing the layout of the space, but maybe within the permissions of the strata or something that people could potentially do a live work experience if they chose to. I don't know, Christine, how that might work, like if it's just permitted anyhow, or if the spaces have to be defined when it's obviously becoming a strata, that the Strata Corp chooses not to do it. But I thought that it might be a nice option. There's a lot of people moving into these small spaces that would like to have a little, work from home space that they could do during the day and not have their neighbors complain if they're, doing it respectfully with noise and odor and light and stuff. So I don't know if that's something that's been contemplated, but I feel like it's something that with people moving into these smaller townhomes and things, it could be a nice selling feature as well for people that want to do little workspaces. And that's just a consideration again. And I do support any green technologies that might be on the table that aren't implemented yet. And yeah, I really like the design of the building, and the color palette is very attractive, and it's a very nice project. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Angela. Well, I don't think I have anything to add to that. What I'm hearing from our panel, though, is there seems to be some real awkwardness with this project to the relationship to Browns Lane. And I took a little trip there, and it's just it's actually kind of a sweet little trail in there. There's trees along there. So many of these public trails just have a solid fence on each property. So you're just walking down this pathway with fences, but there's a lovely row of trees along there. And I just thought one of the things that's kind of missing in this project is the utilization of that lane and integrating your property with it, having a better connection between them. And I think a lot of the discussion we've had today is really around that. So whether you make individualized yards, you have one big lawn, what kind of fence, and that sort of thing. And I have to say, I really support the low fence, that sort of open. You could actually almost create kind of a cottage feel where each unit could have ended up going out onto this nice little quiet treed lane. But the design of your building isn't quite conducive with that, because the whole ground floor is a garage. So, and I don't know if you can change that, because I figure you probably have the 2-car parking in there to cover all your parking requirements. I'm assuming, because I almost would have loved to have seen like a family room or bonus room there in the bottom at the back, and then there'd be a way for the residents of the building to spill out into that back area and look out onto that lane and sort of integrate that lane with the property a bit more. But that may not be something that could even be accomplished in this project. But I do appreciate how Brad's made an effort to keep the fence low. I do like the chain link fence with the wood. I think it's a really nice way to work the fence, keep that open, and just sort of try and work the landscaping as best as you can in there. And I think Angela's idea of maybe a little bit of low-level LCD lighting along there might just really spark up that lane a little bit too, and make it a very inviting inviting place as people walk along. It's not just a fence or barrier keeping people out. So that would be just my one comment, not a recommendation, but just some thoughts on the discussion we've had as a whole here today. So I think it's been very productive. So thanks to the group for their presentation. So I think what we need to do is have our committee just, our panel just look over some of these recommendations, because I'm hearing a few here. First of all, look at ways to enhance, I think it's the north face of building 3 is the one along, okay. Through materials and landscaping to improve the view from Labio Road and make the entry into the property more inviting. Does that sound kind of reasonable as a recommendation, panel? Yeah, okay. And consider ways to individualize the front facades of the units. It's been mentioned a couple times, so we'll put that in as a recommendation. Consider enhancing the gates from Browns Lane with some landscaping or trellises to sort of give them a little more, again, more inviting aspect for entry into the property. And consider moving the bike racks. And I wasn't sure, I forgot what was said there. Kate, maybe you can remind me. You were suggesting to move the bike racks and do something with that area?
Yeah, I was just thinking if the bike racks moved, because, you know, bike theft, bike security is always an issue. So putting it more in the middle might be beneficial. I don't know. I don't know how often they're going to be used to be honest.
Yes, again, my pet peeve with these kind of individualized units, I don't think anybody's going to ever use them. They're going to park their bike at their friend's house.
But just that's a good, you know, there's space at the front there to do something more entry, like if the bike racks moved, and maybe they will consider removing one of the additional parking spaces in order to accommodate their seating and bike racks. But I'll leave that up to them. So,
do you want to make that as a recommendation? Just leave that out.
I think we can just leave. I think I'm happy with the first recommendation about improving the front entry.
Right. I kind of made that very general so we could blanket a number of things. Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds good. Consider a low-level lighting plan along Browns Lane, and consider some plants, putting plants, or adding plants to the pathways between the buildings. Yes, Kate?
You don't need to make that a recommendation from my point of view.
Okay.
Just a comment.
And I'm not hearing any concern about the variances, so I think we've got support there. So I'm seeing 4 recommendations then. 1, look at ways to enhance the north face of the building, et cetera, as I said before. 2, consider ways to individualize the front facades of the units. 3, consider enhancing the entry gates from Browns Lane with landscaping or trellises. And 4, consider a low-level lighting plan along Browns Lane. That would, so if everybody's in agreement with that, perhaps I can have a motion to accept the proposal with those recommendations and approval for the variances. Jason moves and Tony seconds.
Well,
in favor? Sorry?
I wasn't actually going, I was actually going to comment on,
okay.
on one of them, the notion of enhancing the entrance identity for the units. I think that's up to the residents themselves. I mean, they're going to have numbers, and I don't know why, you know, we would need to, you know, be sort of that pedantic. It doesn't bother me the way it is. I mean, every townhouse project, you kind of figure it out once you've moved in there. And I'm not sure it's important enough for us to make a recommendation, but if everybody else on the panel thinks it's significant, then I'll be quiet.
Okay. Kevin, I think you referred to that one. So did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I think the reason I looked at the color of the door, it's pretty much, they're all white, which is the same color as the trim. And because of the narrowness of these entranceways, I think for each individual person that buys them, I think there's going to be very little they can do to personalize them, in my opinion. But I know whether there's a way to, I've seen projects where they alternate door colors, provide different door colors, or maybe have something unique with the numbering of the units. That was just my comment on that. And if anybody else wants to jump in on it and agree with it, they can, or they want to go along with Tony, that's fine too.
Kate, were you wanting to comment on that?
I was just going to say it can go either way, but it's not a matter of wayfinding in this circumstance. I think it's a small enough project, and because of the way the topography works, it's quite clear where each unit sort of is and ends. And so it feels less of importance for wayfinding as it has on other projects. So I'm okay with it not being included, but if it wants to be included, it's okay too. Sorry.
Wow, we're all waffling here. Well, if we're not, yes, Tony, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, these are recommendations and suggestions, and obviously the applicant here that we have different opinions on, and it's not a life-threatening deal breaker of any kind. So we can just leave it if you want, as
Just
is.
leave it as a comment. It's been made.
Yeah, and I will go back and second Jason's motion if it's still out there
I
somewhere.
think we can still, if we don't change anything, we can keep the same motion. Okay, so we have a motion and a seconder, and all in favor. Everybody's in favor. Okay, that's passed. So thank you very much, Alan, to you and your team, and all the best
you
for
very
that
much.
project.
Okay, bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye. Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, we have a second project to look at tonight. This one's on Hanson Road, and City Planner Sadie Robinson will introduce it to us.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, panel members. This project is for 200 Hanson Road. DP 1285 is for phase 2 of a multifamily residential development, which includes 2 4-story apartment buildings with a total of 84 dwelling units. That's 42 units in each building in the northern portion of the site at 200 Hanson Road. The subject property is located southeast of the undeveloped portion of Hanson Road, which is off East Wellington Road between Madsen and Bowen Roads. It is zoned medium density residential, R8, and is designated neighborhood in the city plan. It falls within Development Permit Area 8 for form and character, and the General Development Permit Area design guidelines apply to the proposed development. There is one requested variance associated with the proposal, which is for maximum building height. The variance would increase the maximum permitted building height for both buildings from 14 meters to 14.8 meters, a proposed variance of 0.8 meters. Joyce Troost, among others, is with us as the applicant tonight. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great, thanks, Sadie. And Joyce, are you presenting then this evening? Okay, you can go ahead.
Well, thank you, everyone. I'm here presenting the architecture. We've got Carol here doing landscape architecture, and Scott's here for civil if there's any questions related to that. I'm just going to start off with an aerial map here to orient everybody to the site. The property hasn't been developed, but it sits about right here. And there's connection from Bowen Road, and then the access point is through a roundabout. And I believe that you guys have all seen actually the phase 1 portion of this development. I was not a part of that part of the development project and design. I'm dealing with phase 2, which is the 2 buildings that sit sort of in the middle right there. So let me switch to the site here. So pretty simple in terms of data. I think it's already been discussed. It's 2 buildings that are a mirrored version of each other. We've got 84 units between the 2 buildings. And if we look at, let me start with the data actually. We're well within the FAR, the lot coverage requirements. It is a purpose-built rental as well. Planning wanted me to mention that as we look at the project. Majority of the first phase, I'll actually slide to the more beautiful site plan here. A majority of the first, oh yeah,
Joyce,
go ahead.
We're not able to see your screen other than the Google Maps that we can see right now.
Thanks for mentioning that.
No problem.
Okay, so here's the colored site plan. We've got the first phase of development, which is all grayed out and is a series of townhomes. The access through the site is this roundabout. It brings you in past building 1 and 2, which is the second phase of development that we're working on. And the way to access it with vehicles is actually turn up here, and then we've got parking sitting in the back of the site. There's also a pathway that takes you from Bowen through the site along the sidewalk here. And I think part of the bigger discussion that we've had in regards to the buildings being sited and their relationship with the internal roadway and access into the buildings is the main access for the actual residence is adjacent to the parking. But what does that leave in terms of the pedestrian access if we're using this pathway and connecting walking? And our approach has been to create a centralized entrance that has an arbor. It presents itself as the way to access the site and to get to the buildings would be through here, the path into the main entrances of either building. We've also tried to increase the pedestrian access to encourage walking and using this pathway by some secondary stairs that have been added along this pathway that would give you access up and access into the ground floor units of the building itself. So you'll see some trellises at those ground floor units, and you'll see an enlarged patio. So we're trying to make that connection to the ground plane and create that community at that level where you've got some outdoor eyes on in the pathway, and you get that access or that connection that you'd be looking for at the ground level. I'll let Carol run through the amenity space, and I know there's some conversations related to that, and then I'll dive first. Before I do that, I'm going to dive into the actual elevations of the buildings themselves. Okay, can everyone see the SketchUp model? Okay, great. So this is a shot through the access road. We've got the phase 1 development on the right-hand side and the first building here on the left-hand side. You can see the main walkway that runs along this access lane, and then the series of pedestrian access points along that walkway, and then the main access point onto the site that would give you wayfinding and direction to the main front doors of the building. So in terms of form and character, a lot of the roof slopes, the colors, the patterning was taken from the first phase of development. Hints of that were taken. We've also tried to create, it's a much larger building. It's a bit more dense. So we've tried to use the roof forms that were put there with the first phase, build on those, add some more textures and patterning, create some recessed decks for nice shadow lines, and to create sort of secondary objects that divide and scale the larger form of the building itself, while not trying to create its own personality. We're trying to create a cohesive community here. So each building is a mirror of the other one, but we've created the patterning and texture differently between the two buildings to give them character, but also create that sort of cohesive look for the development. I'm going to swing around to the other side of the building, and you'll see the front here is the main loading area, and then we've got the entry points for each of the buildings here kind of centralized around that loading area. I think that's it in terms of the presentation for the architecture, and I will I'll turn it over to Carol. She wants to dive into the landscape.
There we go. Hello, everybody. So yes, Joyce has set up the pedestrian movement around the site and how people get to the front doors from the main what I call Road A, because that's what it was called at the very beginning of the project, the road that goes east to west through the site. What I would like to explain is the plaza space, which is in the very middle of the site between buildings 1 and 2. The challenge has been how to accommodate people coming from all different directions from when they park their cars and they want to go to building 1 entrance or building 2 entrance, and also to accommodate the people moving in and out. So we have the drop-off, pull-in parking next to the plaza space, so that there's adequate, ample hard surfacing, but also wanting to build on the sense of green space. We have an existing fir tree. There aren't many trees on the site as it is. And so we're keeping this fir tree with a big grassy area around it to protect the roots as much as possible, but also wanted to build on that to create sufficient soft landscape to create a very sort of welcoming approach to where you decide you're going to building 1 or building 2. And within that plaza space, we have not massive, but nice sized street trees with clear stems planted into areas of shrub planting. And associated with those, there would be park benches. But the walkway from the plaza space south through to that main stairway to the sidewalk below combines soft landscape and the landscaping of the rainwater detention area, which is that large sort of pale blue color. It's not really going to be containing water except in heavy rainfall, and it will be treated, it'll be sown with grass seed, so it'll be a large grassy space, depression with planting around the slopes, but following that in a serpentine form and tree lined will be a nice pathway, and that will have grass edges and seats to give a sense of space and assist with personal safety, which is a common theme. It's a common approach to dealing with the landscape on this site. Then we also want to think about how we're going to get to the amenity space in the northeast portion of the site. And I know that there was some staff reservations about the location of the amenity space up there, but we have to bear in mind that this amenity space is not just for the apartment buildings, it's for the whole site, it's for all of the townhouse residents as well. So in a way, it's better that it is not specifically attached to either part of either phase of the project, and that it's on neutral ground, as it were. And that amenity space is significant. It's a large area. There's space for a ball court. There is space for running around on that large grass area. And between the two, which serves both spaces, would be a hard surface with benches, accessible picnic table and bicycle rack, and all accessed by accessible, safe path system. So if you were needing a safe, accessible route you would walk on the north side of building 2, going eastwards to a crossing point just on the south of building 15, which is townhouse building, and then go north on a sidewalk up to the amenity space. But there are other less formal routes which can be used and would be equally accessible through the site, but they would be through the parking lot. That is the nature of the project. What I should also mention is that on the north side, on the north property line, that is industrial land, and it's being operated as in industrial use. And so we're proposing a solid wood 6-foot fence all along that edge. And in front of that would be a significant amount of tree and shrub planting, and then grass areas to the edges of the parking lot. The client has specifically requested space for snow storage, and those areas are identified on the plan. The planting palette will be very similar to the phase 1 project, and includes medium-sized trees and smaller trees. There'll be a lot of native species, drought-tolerant species, as well as some tough ornamental adaptive species. And the idea is to incorporate a certain amount of flowering shrubs, as well as more sort of foliage type plants. And then around the south side of the property, where we have the retaining wall edging the phase 1 sidewalk, again, that would be shrub and tree planting, smallish trees, because we don't want to impact the retaining wall. And that planting will provide some shade to the grassy spaces adjacent to the patios. I think I should emphasize that the treatment of the south and west edges of the apartment buildings is deliberately expansive grass to allow for people to play, to encourage children to play outside, but have adults out there with them as well. So it will be strata maintained by the owners. They will have a big interest in making sure this site is looked after, and the way the landscape has been designed is to really make sure that the maintenance aspect will be as simple as possible to make it affordable. One other thing that I did want to mention was that we have a lot of points of access onto that sidewalk on the north side of the building, so that people can get from their parked vehicles without cutting through landscape. I was particularly mindful of the fact that you see that all the time in parking lots where people cut through planted areas. And so I wanted to minimize that impact as much as possible. There are a couple of things that are on the landscape to-do list. One is that staff have identified that there are 3 surplus parking stalls, and those could be converted to soft landscape. So we will determine the best location for that. And the other item is that we haven't yet put together our landscape lighting plan. And the aim is to have as much lighting off the building as we can. But where we need to have lighting for walkways, sidewalks, and the amenity space, those will be robust and dark sky fixtures. So we will be dealing with that. And I think I've mentioned everything I needed to. And so I will hand back to Joyce in case there's anything else that she would like to say.
I think I just wanted to address the access one more time. I think my thoughts are that this is the very public way that the public accesses the buildings, and by having these secondary access points and not having an entrance along this facade, it creates a very sort of semi-public, semi-private place for the residents to feel comfortable to go out, where they're not having the public sort of walking through that area. So I think that was the real intention on having those two, that delineated stairway, and then having that main entrance, or that main arbor that would direct you to the front door of the buildings and facing the backyard, or sorry, facing the parking lot. And that's it.
Okay. Is that your presentation done then, Joyce?
Yep, we're all done. Unless Scott needs to add anything, but I think he's here to answer questions mostly.
Okay. All right. Maybe you can stop sharing your screen then, and we'll let the panel give their feedback on it. So Jason, would you like to start? Oh, sorry, I meant to ask, is there anybody, sorry, before we go, Jason, is there any questions for staff?
Well, I did have a question actually.
Oh, okay.
About, I was a bit confused by something I saw in the SketchUp model. It looked like in the three-dimensional model, building 1 of phase 1, which I guess is immediately to the next door to building 1 of this phase, is that a 3 or 4 story building? Unlike the other buildings, it seemed like it was a different scale in their SketchUp model.
Maybe Joyce or Sadie.
Sorry, I'm trying to get back to the mute. I was trying to look at the model and get back to the mute button. So the first building is a different phase. That's the townhome part of phase 1. And it is a different scale. It's a three-story townhome.
Okay. Thank you.
So no other questions for staff. We'll just go ahead then, Jason.
Okay, thank you. Sure. Thank you for your presentation. Yeah, I appreciate the sensitivity to the context and the massing and carrying over the roof forms and the roof lines. My main problem with the massing is actually the fact that I feel like if the trellis was removed from that front elevation, it would be very difficult to tell where the entry was. It's just kind of in a bit of a recess. I like the location siding wise in terms of the access to that central corridor that you've created, but the massing of the building or the materiality of the building to me don't really advertise where the main entry of the building was, and maybe that could be reinforced. Maybe it's as simple as pulling the stair tower out a little bit and making it proud and giving it maybe some different materiality, or I think some sort of architectural development around the entry would be very beneficial to the project. And then the reason I asked the question about the height of the existing building 1 in phase 1 is because it looked like this building 1 was very close to it, and at 4 stories plus a 1.3 to 1.5 meter raise, I was concerned about that relationship being so close. But if that's a taller building already, then that alleviates some of my concern. If it's not a 2-story building like some of the others. In terms of the parking, I do have a little bit of concern about it being a bit of a relentless field of parking. I'd like to see some breakup with the landscaping and help alleviate some of the hot summer days we're experiencing more. And then the other concern I had was around the stormwater management 2. It's being in such a prominent location right by that main entry. If you read the notes, it said it's a grassy area that's kind of depressed. might be nice if it had more character to it if it was a rain garden instead of just a grassy pit, a grassy hole. Otherwise, those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Jason. Angela?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Very wonderful project, infill project in this location. It's going to be great. The school's right there, and all the transit, and yeah. So I just had a couple things to agree with staff on, and that was sort of the architectural differentiation between the two. I know you mentioned that very carefully tried to connect with the other buildings, but if there was just something, and I'm not the architect, but it's just something a little bit different, and maybe that is just the entryways that Jason pointed out, because I totally agree with that. It feels like the entryway is sort of lost in the building facade. So maybe that is where the differentiation could come out. There was, I think, I can't remember, 47 biking stations inside the building. But I feel like more and more people are commuting with electric bikes these days. And especially in this location, it's a perfect commuter place for people to might want to live. It's so central to everything. And are those bike stations, do they have chargers for electric bikes? Just a question for maybe through the chair to Joyce.
Yeah, I know that the zoning does require a certain number of them to be electric, so we would be following what the requirement would be.
Okay. Yeah, I would just like to suggest that maybe maybe this project is conducive to going above and beyond what staff what the bylaw says. I think that the more charger stations you have, maybe the less parking spaces required. Anyhow, that's a suggestion. And just with the same thought that Jason had with the parking, just big area. I know there's been a lot of thought going into the site design and everything. So I just thought maybe something that could be a good addition is, and I don't know, is the material permeable? Is it a permeable parking lot or just areas permeable? I guess through the chair to maybe Scott or Joyce.
Yeah, somebody.
Carol, that's for you, but
I'm trying to unmute. Where's the button? No, it's not permeable. It would be asphalt. That's something that we would have to discuss with the client.
Okay. So maybe just something to consider if, just building on Jason's idea of breaking it up somehow, and maybe if there's permeable parking areas, maybe that just alleviates some of the heat island effect. And also to do with the detention ponds, I thought, is there some sort of decorative border around them, or like I wasn't sure how deep they would be for safety for children?
Okay, so they will be very safe. The side slopes are no steeper than 3 to 1, and they're not, as I say, they will have a minimum water level or water depth of 10 inches during a really heavy rainfall event. The way they work, because of the nature of the ground, they have to be basically lined. They are not your typical fully infiltration rain garden. And so they will have drain rock and storage chambers under the surface. And so we're going to put on a covering of about a foot of soil so that we can get some grass to grow in there. The edges of the detention area will be planted. So there is some limitation as to how they can be treated. And we also do want to think about how they can be maintained as well. So if you add features, then you are going to be changing the way they can be maintained. And this project is very much affordable living. And so the more complicated, the more expensive the maintenance is going to be, which is why the landscape treatment is very simple, robust, because the maintenance of it, if it's more intricate, could end up being too expensive, and then you end up with an eyesore, which is not the direction we want to go in. So I hope that helps with the understanding of what this rainwater detention facility is, and it's part of a network that goes right through the site. So the water that comes in there is being treated before it goes eventually through into the city system.
Okay. Yeah, I thought I just wanted to make sure that if there was ever times where it would be, filled to the point where, maybe there should be a safety feature around it that was sort of decorative or something.
Yeah, I think it would drain within 24 hours. I think that's the way it works. And Scott, please jump in if you have anything to add. But that's my understanding, is that, it is literally a detention feature. And of course, the volume of water that it's storing is far greater than what we see on the surface because of the tanks below.
Okay. Okay. Aside from that, I would just want to point out that I do agree with staff to consider any sort of solar panel implementation if possible, but this being an affordable housing project, I don't know if that's on the table, but I always would support that, as well as any sort of rooftop feature, even if it was just a small area for gathering space to enjoy some views, if that was also on the table. And if there was an opportunity to create some of that green space into allocated community garden area. There's a lot of residents there, and maybe that's something that if there was enough residents that were interested, that they could have that opportunity if there was an allocated space for that. So that's all I just wanted to add. So thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Angela. Kate, would you like to go?
Great. Great. Thank you, everyone, for your presentation. I actually have some questions for the design team regarding the whole site layout. I guess I'm going to start with why I have the questions. I can really see this project being a little bit shifted, where the amenity space becomes the central green and the buildings get pushed back a bit. So then you kind of reinforce that walkway, the whole grass and plantings, and on the south side of your building sort of bleeds into that central green. And that central green has all your amenities, basketball court and everything. And so then it feels more available and accessible to all the phases of the design, instead of being pushed to the upper corner. And so I just wanted to ask if that was considered. And so, like, I could just see shifting your building building 1 turning a little bit more north, building 2 pushing up and creating this little wedge for all that amenity space, and then reconfiguring the parking around the outside, especially on that edge that butts up to the non-residential use lots. And so I just wondered if you wanted to comment on if that was considered or not, or why, or what are the constraints, or et cetera, et cetera.
Well, I inherited the location of the site. It was phase 1 had already been approved, and I've come in and designed the 2 larger buildings. But I'm not sure if Carol maybe could. So I don't know the big picture of conversation around both phases and how it landed where it did. But I don't know if Carol or Scott, maybe you have a bit more insight.
I don't have insight to the very early stages of the site design. I was brought in when the layout had been established, so I can't speak to early discussions.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think you have a lot of land to work with, which we often are seeing sites that are very constrained. So we have limited space for buildings and amenity space, but here you have quite a bit of land, and it feels like the site layout is not quite right yet, from my perspective. And I don't know how the rest of the design panel will feel. And I just thought there might be some constraints for why it's like this, but I can just really see your amenity, that wedge being brought in there, and the building's just slightly tweaking a bit. And then you have this nice central, really community-focused space. So I don't know what right now, Marie, that's sort of like where I'm thinking is I'm not satisfied with where they've located the amenity space, and especially the ball court that it's butting up against the residential units. I think that should be at the very minimum sort of switched with the other, and be adjacent to the industrial use, or whatever the other zoning is. I know it's not residential, there's the gas station and postal unit. But I really think the site layout needs some tweaking, and then I think you have it would just work better all around. And it would also, I think you could work with the grades and make it more accessible too, because I was concerned about the accessibility from that central walk up to your buildings, that you're going to have to divert and go around if you have any mobility issues. And so that it just might free up that land and allow you to make your project more accessible, more community focused, and centralize all of your amenities. So I'm going to leave it there right now, Marie, and see what the other panel members have to say, to see where I go with my recommendation.
Yeah, that's a big ask, I guess. Maybe we can hear from the rest of the panel on that. So maybe if you're done at the moment, then we can maybe move on and have Tony and Kevin continue, and we'll just see if they have further things to add about that. Okay, Kevin, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Joyce and your team for the presentation. I have right off the bat, I have no problem for the height variance right off the bat. I don't think anybody else has mentioned that, but I have no problems with the height variance. I guess jumping in with Kate's comment, I had a similar concern about how I guess, Joyce, you inherited this common drive aisle that's coming down to the property, and now you have to deal with how the 2 buildings relate to that road. Obviously, we don't want to see parking right in that section of the property, but it seems everything is quite layered right now with the 2 buildings. Obviously, if you had more than 2 buildings, which would be more costly, you could probably do more creative things, because I think Jason hit on it earlier about having one massive area for all the parking. Obviously, I guess becomes quite efficient that way, but obviously it doesn't lend itself to looking very nice. So I guess there could be options for that, Joyce. I'm not sure what options you might have looked at, but I had similar concerns regarding the siting of the two buildings, and whether there's any solution for it, I'm not sure. But I'll leave it at that, see what Tony says, see if anybody else wants to jump in on that. But siting of the buildings was a little bit of a concern for me as well. So that's it for siting. Form and character. Joyce, the entries to the two buildings that go into the lobbies, those are roof covers over top of them. Is that correct? Flat roofs? They're not pergolas, correct? They're flat roofs?
They're flat roofs that slope back up. So they gain height as they come towards you.
Away from the building, they go up like a inverted
That's
slope?
Right.
Okay.
That's right. I mean, it kind of is a butterfly slope, but essentially a majority of the slope is sort of coming at you.
Okay, and do you know roughly what the heights of those are? About 10 feet or so?
Yeah, maybe, well, no, I'd say it's a little bit more than that because it's intersecting, it's well above the first floor, so maybe 12, 14 feet.
Okay, yeah, because that was one of the staff's comments regarding looking at ways to, and I believe, to enhance those two entries. I think that could probably be dealt with more or less probably through the materials you use. Probably a heavy fascia might help there. I'm not going to dwell on it, but if it's 14 feet, I think that'll probably be enough to enhance the entry. I think everything else is just the materials. The two elevators, are they cable or hydraulic? Because I'm curious how you're dealing with it above the roof line, if they're cable.
That's a good question. I'll have to get back to you.
Yeah, okay, because if they're hydraulic, obviously it's not a concern. But I'm not sure if you're gonna have to carry it up into attic space and whether or not that could affect your roof line. So it's not a recommendation. I think it's just pointing it out. Hopefully you have a solution for that. Materials, I think they're mostly vinyl siding. Is that correct? And you're indicating on some of the elevations, and it's tough because you're using SketchUp, are you indicating belly bands wrapping around the building too at all the floor levels? I know on
yes. So if you look at the townhomes, there's a heavy horizontal line on all of the townhomes. So we're integrating that horizontal feature back into our building, but we've actually switched colors at different locations. So the horizontal portion of the balconies is white, and then the sort of belly band is a sort of a gray, and makes it a little bit less traditional.
Okay, and with the vinyl sidings, you have some wall faces that are quite long, so you're gonna have to deal, if you have the horizontal profile, you're gonna have to deal with lapping of that, especially on some of the elevations. I'm not sure how you deal with that, but it becomes a little bit of an eyesore. But if you can look at maybe more of a vertical extrusion on some of those longer faces, I'm not sure if you want to do that, but it's not a recommendation, but it's always one of those pet peeves of mine when I see it. You see those splice lines, especially on larger wall faces, that could look kind of awkward. So that's it for form and character. Landscape concept. I agree with Jason's comment regarding the main steps that come up off the road. Even though it's wider than the other ones, I think you have opportunities there to maybe enhance it a bit more. You have the arbor there, but maybe on either side, maybe a couple of majestic trees or something there, Carol, that you might be able to enhance that a little bit more to provide a little more oomph to that corner. And I don't see any evergreen trees in your palette. Am I missing something, Carol? I don't see any conifers. All
yeah,
I see is deciduous trees.
I let me just have a quick look at my plant palette. I'm not overly keen on conifers. Let me
Ouch.
see. No, I don't have. I do have strawberry tree, which is an evergreen tree, but they are predominantly deciduous.
Okay. Well, let Kate decide. Actually, Kate didn't really comment too much on the landscape concept, which is kind of surprising me. So if she wants to jump in later, I would like to see some conifers on the site, and more than just the Serbian spruce and columnar ones. I'd like to see, especially on a large site like this, some larger evergreens. So maybe consider that. The retaining walls along the road, are you putting like cascading plants going down the retaining walls?
Oh, there will be. There are on phase 1. There are. So we'll be following on that concept.
Because it's quite a long wall.
Yes,
so.
that's right. Yeah.
I agree with the other comments regarding reducing some of the stalls to put landscape islands in. And you have a lot of asphalt, so maybe looking at some areas that could be permeable pavings in the parking areas. The garbage enclosure, you have not provided details for those yet. I'm assuming the city will want to see what you're planning to do for the enclosure for that. And also, there's no pedestrian link. You're showing crosswalks to other areas of the site, but you don't show a crosswalk coming across from the garbage to the main building. There's an area there that you can put it between the 2 wheelchair parking stalls, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, we'll have to look at that as to how that will work. Yes.
And also, I don't see a pedestrian link from this site to Hanson Road. It kind of stops. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right.
So,
we could define a pathway from the west end where that tree is with the letter D. Those are sidewalks that go down either side of the landscape area, and so we could continue a walkway down. Yeah,
I guess people could exit. There's, I guess, specifically building number 1 for people to get through there from a pedestrian link. From the park through the parking lot, there's really no route through there. And I would assume that a lot of people would want to link up with the Parkway Trail, which isn't too far from here, from this site, and for them
across the way
through there. So I noticed the snow storage areas. I'm assuming that's for the plowed snow to be pushed into, which is a nice touch there. Even though I guess you could have considered, I guess, other things. That's going to be a grassed area. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Okay. And that's pretty well it. I think there is a lot of potential for this project. Unfortunately, your hand's kind of been shown to you how you have to relate this building to the phase 1, but whether or not there's more alternatives to how you can site these buildings, I'll leave it up to everyone else to decide. But a nice project, and we need affordable housing. So thank you very much.
Kevin, Scott Stevenson, seems to me I saw a hand up there a while ago when we were talking about the site planning. Did you want to make a comment?
Yes, thank you. Not that I'm by any means a site designer, but just I can't visualize how the buildings would be rotated. But in terms of possible constraints that created this layout that we have, there are 2 city-owned utility mains along the north property line that are in a right-of-way on our property. And as you can probably see, the property comes to basically a point at the Hanson Road cul-de-sac. which creates a loop that we need to maintain. We can't have a one-way access. We need the loop for fire truck and emergency vehicles. So I'm not sure if that helps explain at all the positioning of the buildings and the parking areas, but those were two things that I thought that might justify how the buildings are sited on the property. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, Scott. Tony, and then maybe we'll have just an open discussion about the site planning after.
Sure. Okay. Thank you. Couple of quick things. I don't have any problems with the variances, as has been mentioned by others. The first thing when I first opened the drawing package, when I got it and looked at it, was, can we do something about that parking lot expanse with any kind of treatment, breakup, paving, color, texture, planting, what have you? But I think you've heard that all, but I think that's quite a critical point. It's a large parking lot and definitely needs, I think, another level of attention. I'm not going to get into the discussion that Kate has raised yet, but I did want to comment on the fact that I liked the main entrance from the road coming in. I liked sort of the sequence of how you came in from the street, and either if you wanted to access the specific units that share those little steps. I presume they have some kind of security gate or something on them, but if not, they will probably add them in short order. But I really quite liked the main route of coming in between the two buildings, the large landscaped area and so forth. I thought, and I think I understood, if I understood Jason correctly and others, that it looked like it could have a lot more of an impact, a much stronger statement, something more welcoming and a little bit more emphatic to say, here it is, you've arrived, and now come through. And then when you get to the interior of the site, as it were, Carol was talking about the plaza that was there with the drop-off and so forth, and then access to each of the two main entrances to the two buildings. I would have liked to have seen more detailed drawings of that, because I wasn't clear exactly what was going on there. I'm assuming, given the talents of the design team, that it's going to be fabulous, but I can only imagine that at this point, because, as I said, it wasn't quite clear. What was clear to me was that the two main entrances to each of the buildings, I thought was proportionally weak to the size of the buildings. And I think that it kind of, it came through this sort of grand space between them and onto this little plaza, and then it kind of fizzled out, So I think that definitely the comments have been made by others, including staff, that each of the main entrances perhaps could do with a little more attention and strengthening and emphasis, I guess, to be a little more in proportion to the rest of the building, because these are quite large buildings, no question about that. I like the amenity space and the explanation that was given by the applicant, that they wanted this to be inclusive to the larger community, including the townhouses and so forth, which is one of the reasons for its location, and perhaps with what Scott has added, maybe another reason, I don't know. But it seems to me that and I'm getting into what Kate raised, if it were made more centralized to the buildings 1 or 2 that we're discussing here, I'm not sure whether you'd still retain that kind of character to it, where people might think that they're trespassing or imposing if it was a little more centrally sited. I kind of like it off to one side, where it doesn't really belong to anybody, but it belongs to everybody. So I don't know if that's clear, but I certainly didn't have a difficulty with it. And it's frankly a hell of a good way to make good use of a very awkward triangular kind of piece of property that doesn't lend itself to parking or much else, certainly not buildings. I thought it's a great opportunity to do what you have shown there. So I guess that's kind of my feeling on it. So I think just attention to the plaza and the building entrances, and some attention to the surface of the parking lot are really my two main points. So I believe I'll stop right there. Thank you very much. Great project.
Well, thank you, Tony. And I don't really have much to add, anything to add to that. I agree with the points that have been made. I don't think it's worth going over any more than that. So maybe if the group wants to add any more comments regarding the siting, and Kate, if you wanted to come revisit that now that you've heard people's the other people's comments.
Yeah, sure. So, and I didn't give my other comments because I kind of wanted to hear the feedback on that if we were going to pursue them changing the site plan, I think that would require them to come back to us potentially if we were going to ask for that much change. And so I hesitated on the rest of my comments. Anyway, I'm not convinced they have the best layout that they can with the site and with and it's mostly because I think this. Yeah, so I think there is opportunity. I was just quickly trying to draw it. You forced me into trying to do your site planning for you. But I'm not convinced of the amenity space location and that it does feel, I think it could feel more like the heart of this development if it was centrally located and you start to create this courtyard central green. And part of that rationale too is that the current where the amenity is, it's sunken, correct? And we're terracing up to the adjacent properties. That's correct, right?
No, it's not sunken because the site is rising to that corner.
Okay, so
there is terracing at the back behind, but that is meeting the higher grade of the neighbors. So generally, the site is sloping up.
Yes, sorry, I phrased that incorrectly, but it slopes up to the neighbors, correct? So it's lower than the neighbors.
Yes, but it's in the highest point of the site.
Highest point of the site, but lower to the neighbors. So the sound created from that ball court is going to be amplified because it is lower than the adjacent properties. As we know, sound goes up. If it was above, there would be less of a sound issue, I believe, from my experience and knowledge. So I am concerned about the location of the ball court being there and its relationship to the adjacent residential properties. And so if we move forward with not asking them to revisit the site plan, I would at least want them to look at how they organize that amenity space with that consideration. Maybe the ball court comes out where the grass is, and then that back corner is more of a foresty, open space landscape, for example. But that said, I still think the project overall has very little tree canopy coverage. It has a lot of paving. And as you know, with the city's new adopted OCP, one of the first priority, one of the largest priorities of the city, the first thing that's identified is the city's their first goal is a green Nanaimo, and that includes a focus on the urban tree canopy, natural areas, and greenways. And even though it's not part of the design guidelines, the guidelines do reference the new form, the DPA 8 forming character references the goal number 1 of the OCP. And I really think this project could push itself a little further to try to bring in more tree canopy coverage, more green space, especially with the scale of parking. And so that's where I started to think about the layout, and that the site layout is not working towards this sort of direction of having greater tree canopy coverage, more landscape. And so that's where I sort of started to look at, this seems a bit awkward. Could we not reorganize to maximize your green spaces and reduce your gray or that large expanse of gray and break it up. So I could easily see building to the edge, the west edge, pushing into the parking, and the building one, the east edge pushing in. So now I've created my green wedge, maybe even pushing more, and I put some parking on one side of the building and some parking on the back, and I'm creating a central courtyard of green and parking, but now I'm breaking up that gray from being one big lump. And so I just started to look at how could you break it up and not have it be this great expanse, and by relocating amenity to create this sort of green heart, possibly with parking, that you could maybe do it. Pardon me, I am overcoming a cold and I'm getting stuff up. So I don't know, design panel, I guess, like, if we left the site plan as is, then I would just make some basic recommendations about contemplating the ball court's location and finding ways to increase the tree canopy coverage. And also I agree with making the stormwater detention area maybe a little more biodiverse. And I don't think that would increase your maintenance. I think we've actually found that lawn cutting is actually high maintenance compared to a very layered planting approach. So I don't know, I'm going to leave it there. I'm just struggling because they have so much land. And
yeah,
so
but
much.
I think we also have to realize we can't redo their project, for one. We can recommend things. I don't know if it's really quite in our purview to recommend a whole site change as long as it's fitting. I don't know. Kevin, maybe you can speak to that.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. As a point of order, it really is, it boils down to, yes, we can make recommendations that the applicant reconsider the siting of the buildings, or consider the sightings of the buildings and alternatives to it. And it is within I guess, I don't want to say the power of our panel, but what we can recommend is we can recommend those types of things. And in doing so, basically all other recommendations get thrown out the window, because most of them will be related to, in some way or another, to the resiting of the buildings. So after, Madam Chair, after you speak to the project and open it up for a motion, I think it would be probably up to Kate to decide whether or not she would want to make a motion that the applicant return with and considering other siting options that can reduce the massive parking and other ways to deal with it. And if she gets a seconder to support her, then it can be open to discussion and we vote on it. If the vote is defeated, then we can look at other options that could include the recommendations. And that's pretty much what we can do.
Okay, well, thanks for clarifying that. So I've seen a number of recommendations, so I think maybe we need to discuss whether we do recommend a different siting, or if Kate wants to make that motion and see where it goes with the group. And then
I think if Kate feels strongly about it, I think Kate should put forth the motion. And even if somebody seconds it, they don't have to support it if they second it. It just gets the motion on the floor and it puts it up for a vote. And if the vote's in favor of it, the applicant comes back. Okay. But I think she should word it, the motion, in a way that clearly identifies what the concerns are.
So would you like to make such a motion, Kate?
I would, given I didn't hear really strong rationale for why the buildings were sited this way, other than it was an inherited site plan. And that I can see some of the other recommendations we have being eliminated with a revisiting of the building siting and the organization of the space. In particular, the entrances, the access from the pedestrian route to the buildings not being accessible currently, or the main access. Also, I think centrally locating the amenity space makes it more accessible to the whole development. And I'm not comfortable with a parking lot being between the buildings and your amenity space. So I don't know if I had the capacity to make a really clear motion, but I believe that it will also help alleviate the expanse of parking if we start to see parking potential on either side of a building with green space mitigating that. Anyway, so I guess, do I have to say I make a motion to do what I just said?
Yeah, I think, Kate, I think your motion would be that you're concerned about the massing of the parking area and the location of the amenity spaces. And that obviously relates to the siting of the building. So you should make a motion that explains that, and it's up to somebody to second it. And then it's open for a discussion, so everyone could jump in individually and speak whether they are or not going to support it. They don't have to speak, but inevitably it'll be put to a vote if you get a seconder.
Okay, so I would like to make a motion for the site design to be revisited in order to alleviate the expanse of parking and to better locate the amenity space and make it more central, and also to improve the accessibility from the public pedestrian connection to the buildings, in addition to hopefully improving the amount of tree canopy coverage and green space connectivity there. So if anyone...
Do we have a seconder? Kevin will second. Okay, we'll have a discussion then. And I had Scott Stevenson had his hand up again. Did you want to add to this discussion now that we're opening the floor to discussion? Scott?
Yes, if I may. Thank you. Just one other point I wanted to make about the location of the play area. I know the owners who will, I guess, rent out all these units, the apartments and the townhouses, were cognizant of the fact that not all tenants will have families and children, and so they might want a little bit of isolation from the play area for noise, just like Kate mentioned about the neighbors. So I kind of like the idea of possibly shifting the play area and the green space, but to make it central might have some opposition from the owners is all I'm thinking, in terms of centralizing that play area for kids and whatnot, and possibly disturbing the whole neighborhood within the site, instead of making it a destination for families and children to go to and use that space. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. Okay, so back to the panel then. In terms of discussing this motion, anybody want to add to that? Joyce would like to speak. Okay, go ahead, Joyce.
Yeah, I definitely hear when you look at the site plan, you see a lot of parking, but that's the required amount of parking. So we can add trees, we can green it up, we could add paving to it. There's lots of ways to add patterned and textured and tree canopies. But the challenge is with two large buildings like that, and that being the required parking, I can't put the parking under the building. It's not cost effective. So, and I'm trying to create an architectural streetscape along that interior lane. So it does become a bit of a challenge. Like, we could tweak the building and create a little bit more green space in front of it to maybe pull out an amenity space, but the reality is we're tucking that parking behind the buildings. And I'm not sure, unless we looked at redesigning the residential altogether and creating multiple buildings, which is not going to be cost effective either, that redoing the site plan is, I think, a big ask, considering I think we actually are embracing some of the architectural features along that roadway and the fact that we need that much parking to actually accommodate this building. I definitely think we could address some of the landscaping, beefing up. There are some If you look at the site plan, there are buffers in between the parking stalls in that middle area that could be planted to create more canopy. And we are going to be able to eliminate some of the parking. So I think we can address a lot of the comments that you guys have given us in feedback. But I'm not sure we can, a reciting of just the building is going to potentially reduce the overall surface area of that parking lot. Thanks.
Okay, is there any other panel like to add anything else to this discussion before we vote on it? Jason?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I was going to say something similar to kind of what Joy said. Ever since Kate mentioned it, I've been on here on my computer, spinning and moving and locating the footprints around, and the problem I see as I'm doing that is one, because this is the amount of parking we need, by rotating the building or moving one of the buildings so they're not coplanar, breaking it up, it makes the parking significantly less efficient, and so you'll end up with more parking area if you could even get it to get the same number of parking stalls, and so it actually could exacerbate the issue a bit. And it also, frankly, I kind of like the location of the buildings now, because it makes that a residential street as opposed to introducing parking into the middle. And instead, with this location, you maintain the residential aspect of the road, and you push the parking back up against the industrial adjacent lots. So I think I tend to prefer that configuration. Just trying to find ways to make it work and try alternates. And as Tony said, that corner back there, I don't know that you could use it for anything else, frankly. I don't know that you could get a drive aisle with parking along it into that shape, so at least not in the efficiency that you can get it out on the field. I think we could certainly address the canopy coverage and just the openness of it, but I don't know that moving it out of this configuration will significantly improve the things that we're trying to get it to do, is my only concern.
Thanks, Jason. And Kate, you had your hand up there. You wanted to add something?
Oh, yeah, I was approaching it with good urban design, eyes on the street kind of approach by making the amenity space central. That as a parent, I would prefer my children playing there versus back in the corner. But I just, maybe I'm just thinking that this site has more opportunity than most sites we see. And yeah, I could see that, Jason, I agree it could end up with more parking, but I don't know. Anyway, I was thinking about taking it as a more community focused development, creating a really strong heart for this community, and that you live with children, you live with elders, you live with all ages, and that should be accepted. But I think that's a hard sell for our current condition of living in isolation. And also I mean, it doesn't matter. I don't have to vote for it, but everyone can, right?
Well, we can still run the vote and see where everybody's at. So let's finish up the discussion and then we'll have a vote. Angela?
May I just ask one question to the team? It's not actually affordable housing, though, is it? It's not affordable.
Yeah, rental housing.
Rental housing. Just want that to be clear.
Yeah, rental, but it's not officially, BC affordable housing. But it's
just want that to be
more
clear.
Affordable.
No rental. There is no.
It's not high-end rental. It's for people who are trying to live, shall we say.
I'm not aware of Ken's financing on the project, if there's any sort of affordability aspect, but it's purpose-built rental. hopefully the more economically we can build it, the more economically the rents become, you know, the entire development is rental as well. So we're not, you know, that's going to create a certain community as well. So it's, I think there's a lot of things we can do in the parking lot based on your recommendation. A lot of connectivity to help alleviate the fact that the amenity is in the corner. But yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Angela, sorry, muted.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to add to Kate's idea. When I saw the site plan, I also too had the thought that, you know, the site plan was not ideal, but I didn't want to bring it up because I thought it was too big of an idea. But, you know, I grew up when I was younger in some apartment blocks that were all, like 3-4 large apartment blocks, and there was green space that connected all of them. And as a child, I have lots of memories of running through these parks and, you know, green spaces, and they were just really accessible, and the parking was off to the side. So it was never sort of an issue for safety and play. So when I see this site, I thought, okay, and, you know, there may be some other constraints with the city's easements or SRWs or whatever. But if there was a possibility, like sort of an easier fix to push the buildings and bring the play area to a central, like Kate is saying, like a green heart of the whole site, I think that is ideal. It may not be ideal to go back to the drawing board a little bit, but one solution I thought, and I don't know if staff would be supportive of it, but you know, there's more thoughts going towards less parking is better. So I don't know, like maybe staff would be supportive to reduce parking requirements significantly, increase the bike stations significantly, and that could be sort of some kind of an exchange, because this is a sort of a node of in the heart of our city where there's major transportation routes. I can see lots of people moving here. They can't afford vehicles. They're going to be riding their bikes. They're going to be taking transit. Why do we need all this parking? I don't really think it's totally necessary. So maybe that's part of the solution, is just reducing the parking stalls, the requirements, and, you know, maybe we can more easily move the building a little bit and less parking, and bring the play and the green space more centralized for the whole two-phased project. So that's kind of just my thoughts on that.
Okay, thanks, Angela. So are we ready to close the discussion and do a vote on this?
If I may, Madam Chair, it's Scott here.
Yeah,
sorry.
Okay.
Just a thought, and you know, I haven't talked to Joyce or Carol or the owners, but the stormwater management feature between the two buildings, you know, we're saying that's a depression right now to handle some overflow drainage, but from a civil engineering perspective, I could more than likely put that all underground, and this could become kind of a central plaza or a seating area, and then we don't have to worry about, you know, the accumulation of any water being a factor, a safety issue. So it could be generally just a flat space that could be used as more green space. I wouldn't want to plant any large trees or anything over top of it, just, you know, with the roots and everything to protect the stormwater management infrastructure below. But I just wanted to throw that out there as a possible option.
Okay, thanks. Some more food for thought. So is the panel ready to vote on this? Yes. Tony?
Thank you. Just wanted to stick my oar in one more time. It seems to be two separate issues here. One is how to break up this massive parking lot that we've all had difficulties with. And I think that's relatively straightforward. There are many, many ways we all know, we've talked about how that can be done. Any parking lot can be improved upon. That's the easy part. Seems to me the bigger issue is whether this big amenity space currently up in the corner of the site should be centralized or not. And if it's to be centralized, then obviously that's a major replan of the site, which would require, sending the applicant off and asking them to reconsider and come back, which in the few years I've been on this panel, about possibly the first time we've ever done that. So I'm kind of choking on that just on principle, as well as having been an applicant in front of these kind of panels myself to consider that kind of a dent in the project schedule, etc. So I guess really it comes down to whether if the amenity area stays where it is, it may not be central to everything. But maybe, as Kate suggested, at the very least, some of the things, parts of it could be rearranged to a more satisfactory layout. And then adding to that the whole idea of more trees, a bigger improvement to the tree canopy, et cetera, everywhere on the site that has also been suggested. Maybe there's some kind of reasonable compromise in there certainly that I could vote for. But anyway, just to confuse the issue a little more, there's my thought.
I'm okay with that.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah. So, Kevin.
Just quickly, I agree. I think if the applicant looks at ways to reduce some of the parking stalls, even get a variance for parking, and look at tree canopies and moored landscape islands. I think we have to accept the fact that unless the buildings are totally repositioned, we're going to have to deal with the amenity areas in that northern corner of the site. And maybe it is possible to eliminate the pond and provide an amenity space there. But I'm fine with leaving the siting the way it is, as long as some measures are taken to reduce the parking area. Thank you.
Okay, so we go ahead and vote then. We have to finish voting on that unless Kate wants to withdraw the.
Yeah, I'll just withdraw. but then I do have other recommendations.
Okay, that's what we'll go through next then. Is everybody happy with that, withdrawing the motion? Yes, okay.
Yeah, I'll remove my seconding of that motion too.
Okay, let's go over. I had quite a list of recommendations, and so I will go over them here, and you guys can correct me if they need to be massaged a little bit. So number one, consider ways to enhance the architectural form of the building to emphasize building entries. Okay, consider increasing the tree canopy coverage throughout the site. Consider adding more landscape features to the stormwater collector between the buildings, or eliminating this feature altogether. I don't know Scott's recommendation. That was there. Yes, Kate?
I think it's that it's still going to exist there. It's just that you don't have to have the grass on top. So okay. They could look at creating more of a plaza with plantings. You can still plant on top of those those chambers, just no trees.
Okay, so consider adding landscape features to the stormwater collector. Is that correct way to put it? I'm not.
Or maybe to look at making it more of a kind of like, I don't know if everyone agrees with this, just Scott suggested it, but if we feel like that area should be more of a central, more useful space, then we could suggest that.
To make the stormwater collection area a more usable space.
Yeah, if that work, that could work. Yeah. Please
correct my wording, because I don't always have the correct wording for these things. Consider adding landscape features such as islands and permeable paving to break up the surface of the parking lot. Consider green features such as community gardens, solar panels, or green roofs. I didn't know if you wanted that in as a recommendation, Angela. Or just, that was just a suggestion. You turn your mic on.
Just a consideration.
Oh, so you don't want it listed then?
Yeah, to consider, what did I say? Solar panels and,
I put green features such as community garden, solar panels, or green roof.
yes, please.
Look at ways to enhance the stairway from the road to better indicate that they lead to the entrance of the buildings.
Do we want to make that accessible, Marie?
Yeah, can we get the word accessible in there somewhere?
Okay, so consider ways to enhance the stairway from the road to better indicate, I don't know. Tell me what you want to say there. Sorry. You say you want it accessible. What do you mean? How do you want that phrase, Tony?
Oh, I would say just to enhance the main entrance from the street to give it more prominence and improved accessibility. Because right now it's steps, right?
Okay.
So he means wheelchair accessibility.
Right. Ways to enhance the main entrance to the building, give it more prominence and improve its accessibility. Consider including more conifers on the site. And then there was something about the retaining walls I missed. Did somebody want something? Consider hanging plants on the retaining walls? No?
There is.
Carol mentioned that she would be putting cascading planting at the top of the retaining walls.
Okay.
And
so
her planting palette includes them.
Yeah.
And sorry, Kevin, I agree with you that I think there should be more evergreens since they are retaining the two evergreens and they feel very lonely and out of place without more evergreens.
Consider reducing some of the parking stalls to add more landscaping.
I think that could be added to the first one, the first recommendation that indicated that we would support a parking variance if they went below the required amount of parking.
You said okay, just a minute here. There's too many of these here. Okay. Add pedestrian link to the garbage enclosure and to Hanson Road. Okay, so let me just go back here. So number one, consider ways to enhance the architectural form of the building to emphasize building entries. Consider, I'm still not getting that in there. Consider increasing the tree canopy coverage throughout the site. Consider adding landscaping features to stormwater collector area to make it a more usable space. Consider adding landscape features such as islands and permeable pavers to break up the surface of the parking lot and reduce parking lot. Okay, and the committee or the panel would support a parking variance. Put that one there, Kevin. Okay, so under number 5, the panel would support a parking variance or less parking as a way to increase green space. Okay, consider green features such as a community garden, solar panels, or a green roof. Look at ways to enhance the main entrance built to the building to give it more prominence and improve its accessibility. Consider including more conifers on the site. Add pedestrian link to garbage enclosure and to Hanson Road. And Kate, you have another one?
I do, just to reconfigure the amenity space in order to not, so that the ball court is not in that corner because of the sounds to the adjacent property.
It's not adjacent, can we put just not adjacent to the neighboring property?
Well, to the residential. I don't have a problem with it being adjacent to the
residential properties.
just because of the elevation, it's going to be loud.
Right. Reconfigure the amenity space so that the ball court is not adjacent to the neighboring residential properties. And Kevin?
Yeah, just I want to be clear because that one recommendation by Tony that regarding accessibility is the entry off of the main road.
Okay.
I want to be clear that it's not the entries to the building, to the lobby.
Entry off the main road.
And the only other one that I had, which is going to be a requirement by staff anyways, is that they provide the enclosure details for the garbage area.
Okay. Enclosure details for the garbage.
And the lighting plan, but that was already talked about, so.
Lighting plan. So I'm getting 12 recommendations. Okay. So do we have a motion to accept the proposal as presented with those?
Yeah, I would make a motion that we accept the application as presented with support for the height variance and those 12 recommendations.
Okay. And seconder? Jason, all in favor? Okay, carried. So thank you, Joyce, and your team. I appreciate your patience and and your presentation there. So all the best with it, and hopefully we've been able to add some guidance in that area. Okay. So night to you all, and I guess we should have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Marie, didn't you say you had something you wanted to talk about after?
You want to adjourn first and then stop?
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. Motion to adjourn.
Tony, and seconded by Kate, and all in favor? Yes. So just wait till we're to stop the recording.